how much is a swimming pool actually worth? Not to swim in, but as a business. Not the tiles, not the water, and not the view from the deck. The whole thing, as an industry. The answer is $62 billion a year. That's the size of the pool, hot tub, and spa industry in the United States alone. It represents a backyard luxury almost every homeowner dreams of. Yet almost none of that $62 billion comes from the part you'd expect. Because the pool itself, the actual structure you swim in, is the least expensive part of the entire equation. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the wealthy never really own their pools, why building them is the least profitable corner of the business, and why an industry worth $62 billion barely flinches when the economy turns. This is the fortune hiding in over 10 million backyards, and the reason almost nobody talks about it. To see how strange this industry is, rewind to 2020. Locked down, stuck at home, and sitting on money they couldn't spend anywhere else, Americans started digging. For 2 years, the country built swimming pools at close to a record pace. Backyards turned into construction sites. Builders had wait lists months long, and the price of a new pool skyrocketed anyway. Then the boom ended, the way booms always do. By 2024, new pool construction had fallen by roughly 15%. The slowdown carried into 2025, and by 2026, the country was building only around 60,000 new in-ground pools a year, close to half the volume of the peak. Cut an industry's flagship product in half, and you'd expect a collapse. Analysts waited for it. The collapse never came. Revenue barely moved. The pool, hot tub, and spa industry held right around that same $62 billion mark. And that contradiction, construction cratering while the industry stayed perfectly steady, is the whole secret. Building pools was never really the business. It was only ever the entry fee. Here's what that entry fee actually buys you. Putting a pool in the ground runs anywhere from $25,000 to well over $100,000. A serious check to write. But that one-time cost is not where this industry makes its living. Because a pool is not a purchase. It's a subscription you can never cancel. The moment the water goes in, a second, invisible meter starts running. And it never stops. Chemicals to keep the water clean. $500 to $800 a year. Electricity to run the pumps around the clock. Another $300 to $500. Then come the filters, repairs, resurfacing, closing it down for winter, and opening it back up in the spring. The typical American pool costs between $1,000 and $4,000 every single year just to stay alive. And that's before anything actually breaks. You're not really buying a pool. You're signing up to pay someone, somewhere, for as long as you own the home. Now, multiply that by millions of backyards through every kind of economy, good or bad. That is the real engine of this industry. Industry data shows that roughly 64% of all the money spent in the pool world has absolutely nothing to do with building new ones. It's maintenance, service, and equipment. That is roughly $40 billion a year in recurring care that shows up whether or not a single new pool ever gets dug. A recession can talk a family out of building a new pool. It cannot talk them into neglecting the 10 million that already exist, because the alternative is a green, stagnant swamp where the backyard used to be. The water doesn't care about interest rates. It has to be maintained forever. So, how many pools are we really talking about? In the United States, there are roughly 10.7 million swimming pools, and closer to 14 million once you add in hot tubs and spas. That works out to one pool for every 31 people in the country. About 60% of them are dug into the ground, while the rest sit above it. An ocean of standing water, and all of it needing the same endless care. But not all of those pools are equal. Roughly 97% of them are residential, the backyard kind, tucked behind suburban homes and luxury villas. Only about 3% are commercial, hotels, resorts, gyms, apartment complexes, and municipal parks. Now, you'd assume that 97% is where the real money hides. It isn't. Because a resort or a public pool is far larger, far busier, and worked far harder than any backyard. That tiny 3% accounts for more than 40% of all the pool water treated and filtered in the country every single day. A mere sliver of the actual pools drives an outsized share of the chemicals, the servicing, the inspections, and the legal compliance. A hotel pool has to be tested and logged, sometimes several times a day, just to stay within local health codes. A community pool has to pass rigid inspections before it can even open for the season. It was never only about backyards. It's the hotels, the resorts, and entire fitness chains quietly running up the bill. An industry this large and this steady should have an owner, a household name, one dominant giant, the way a handful of names dominate cars, or airlines, or smartphones. It doesn't have one. The pool business is run by roughly 125,000 separate companies, and most of them are tiny. Local builders, 2 truck service routes, the neighborhood supply shop with a rack of chlorine in the window. The single largest player in the entire industry is a distribution company called PoolCorp. In its 2025 financial year, it moved about $5.3 billion in sales and opened 2026 with sales up another 6%. And its strongest growth came not from construction, but from maintenance. Even the biggest company in the business makes its steadiest money the same way everyone else does, by keeping existing pools alive. And yet, for all its size, that giant still amounts to only around 8.5% of the total market. No company, not one, controls even 10% of it. That is what makes this a quiet giant. An industry worth $62 billion, spread so thinly across so many small hands that no single brand ever rises high enough to notice. An industry with no face is an industry nobody talks about. There's one final layer, and it explains why the people at the top keep paying without blinking. A pool was never purely a cost. It's a signal. In luxury real estate, a well-designed pool can lift a property's total value, by some estimates as much as 15 to 20% in high-end markets. Across the hospitality industry, more than half of all new luxury hotels are now built with at least one. The pool is how a home or a resort announces exactly what it is before a single word is spoken, and a signal has to be maintained, or it stops working. A pool that represents wealth has to look the part. That means a cosmetic refresh every 5 to 7 years, a full resurfacing every 10 to 15, equipment replaced on a rolling cycle, and constant invisible attention in between. More and more of that upkeep is now sold the way everything else is, as a subscription. Billed monthly, running quietly in the background. The very thing that makes a pool a luxury is the exact thing that guarantees the spending never ends. For the people who own them, the pool is proof they've arrived. But for the $62 billion industry that keeps them running, that same proof is an annuity that renews itself year after year. So, the next time you see one, glass still at golden hour, glowing behind a villa in the hills, look again at what's actually in front of you. The hole in the ground was only the entry fee. Everything that comes after it, the chemicals, the service crews, the replacement filters, and the decades of quiet upkeep, that is the business. 10.7 million pools, 125,000 companies, $62 billion a year, and not a single owner in control of it. And remember, that's just the United States. Now imagine that number worldwide. The pool was never the asset. Keeping it alive was.